Welcome to True Echo, where real voices rise, and unheard stories get the spotlight they deserve. Today's story is one that will stay with you long after the final note is played. It's about a teenage girl, a battered piano, and a concert hall that thought it knew what greatness looked like, until she shattered their expectations with nothing but truth and courage. Stay with us, because what you're about to witness isn't just a performance, it's a revolution. Now, let's begin. You're really going to play that? The words cracked through the air like a whip, silencing the final tuning hums of the orchestra. Mr. Hawthorne, velvet-suited and polished to perfection, stood with one brow arched, gazing at the upright piano being pushed across the stage on squeaky wheels. His voice was laced with mockery so refined, it drew laughs from some in the audience who didn't even understand what was funny. But Lena Morrow wasn't laughing. She didn't move. She didn't flinch. She clutched the edge of the piano bench, her knuckles white, her fingers trembling ever so slightly. Hawthorne circled the piano like a predator examining a wounded animal. With the tip of his silver baton, he tapped the wood and recoiled theatrically. "That thing belongs in a barn, sweetheart," he sneered, loud enough for the nearby tech crew to hear. "Not in front of 1,000 donors expecting Rachmaninoff on ivory." The words were a blade. But Lena didn't bleed. "I'll still play," she said. Her voice was soft, but steady. The kind of steady that comes when you've made peace with being underestimated. The kind of steady that made Hawthorne blink once before giving a tight, dismissive smile. "Suit yourself," he said, turning. "Just don't say I didn't warn you. One cracked key and this entire hall's going to laugh you off stage." He vanished into the shadows. Lena didn't look after him. Instead, she ran her hand gently along the top of the upright. It was a battered, half-forgotten relic with peeling varnish, a pedal held together with duct tape, and one key that stuck like a broken promise. But it was hers. It had been hers since she was 8. Since her mother died. Since her father, greasy hands and bloodshot eyes, pulled it out of a neighbor's shed and said, "Let's fix this. Let's make it sing again." It had never sounded perfect. But it had always spoken the truth. Tonight, she would too. Backstage was a blur of whispers and glances. 2 girls from the East Coast Conservatory passed her, one giggling as she glanced at the piano. "I thought this was a concert, not a flea market," the tall one said. Lena said nothing. She closed her eyes and waited for her cue. Mr. Hawthorne's voice returned, now booming from the stage. "Next, we welcome a very special performer. A wild card, if you will. Proof that this program is open-minded, sometimes too open-minded, perhaps." Laughter rippled through the audience. Miss Lena Morrow, playing on her personal instrument. Silence followed. Then a spotlight shifted. The red curtain parted. And it was time. The light struck her skin like heat. Blinding. Blistering. Lena stepped onto the stage as if stepping into the very eye of the storm. Her legs felt like they didn't belong to her, numb, wobbly, distant, but her grip on the piano never loosened. She pushed the upright forward, the wheels shrieking against the polished floor, every groan of the old instrument drawing snickers from the crowd. A low murmur floated from the back rows. "Is this a joke? She's really gonna play on that thing?" Lena sat. Slowly. Deliberately. She didn't look up, didn't scan the crowd for friendly eyes or signs of mercy. She just placed her fingers above the keys like she had done 1,000 times in her father's garage. The piano wasn't polished. But it was honest. And so was she. The hall went still. The orchestra members looked confused. A few exchanged glances. No one moved to join her. Because she hadn't brought sheet music. She wasn't here to perform what someone else had written. This was hers. Lena closed her eyes and breathed in. The scent of rosin, dust, cologne. Then she played the first note. Not with a bang. Not a flourish. A single, low C, soft. Steady. Then another. A chord. A heartbeat. The melody built slowly, fingers dancing through memories, through loss, through love and late nights and the quiet hum of grief. It was not perfect. One note cracked under pressure. Another came in late. But it didn't matter. Because for the first time that evening, the room wasn't listening with its ears. It was listening with its heart. She played like someone writing a letter to a ghost. Every pause said what words couldn't. The left hand carried rhythm like footsteps in snow. The right whispered stories only she could tell. And then, a loud crack. The audience jolted. The back leg of the piano had buckled slightly. The entire instrument tilted left. A collective gasp surged through the theater. She nearly fell. But she didn't stop. Lena slid into a new key, shifting her weight and letting the piano lean without collapsing. Her hands never broke rhythm. If anything, the music changed, became darker, fuller. Her fingers didn't just play the melody, they fought for it. The crowd, which had been mocking moments ago, now sat breathless. The piano trembled beneath her. But she anchored it. Like it had anchored her all her life. And when she hit the final chord, deliberate, minor, raw, it hung in the air like the very soul of the room had exhaled. Silence. Then. A single clap. Then another. Then a dozen. Then the entire room erupted. Lena didn't rise. She didn't bow. Her hands still hovered above the keys as if afraid to let go. As if the moment might slip away. Mr. Hawthorne stood off stage, rigid, face pale. He signaled to cut the lights. But it was too late. The revolution had already begun. The curtain quivered as the house lights dimmed prematurely. The applause still thundered, as if refusing to obey the lighting technician. In the shadows offstage, Mr. Hawthorne's lips moved in tight commands through his headset, his gaze burning into Lena as if sheer disdain could pull her off the stage. But Lena was still seated, hands resting lightly on the piano's frame. Her shoulders rose and fell with each breath, her pulse racing not from nerves now, but from something closer to defiance. She looked up, and through the haze of the lights, she saw the audience, people rising to their feet, some with tears, others with their hands pressed over their mouths. Not because she had hit every note, but because she had told the truth. And then the voices came. Encore. Let her play again. Let the girl finish. A chant swelled from the back of the hall, building like a second wave. Let her play. Let her play. Backstage, Hawthorne's composure began to fray. You've got your applause, Miss Morrow, he muttered as she walked into the wings, trying to intercept her. Take your bow and leave it at that. Before you ruin the only chance you'll ever get to be remembered fondly. Lena didn't answer. She simply stepped around him. Her knees gave out halfway down the corridor, and she dropped onto a bench beside a row of unused timpani. Her chest heaved. Her palms were still slick with sweat. She couldn't tell if she was going to laugh or cry. Then someone knelt beside her. Hey, said a voice. Soft, young. Familiar. Lena blinked. It was Emily Daniels, senior conservatory student, prodigy, darling of every critic. Dressed in a regal green gown, she should have belonged to another world. But her eyes held no judgment. Only wonder. That was, Emily began, then stopped, shaking her head. I've played on Steinways my entire life. But I've never made people cry like that. Lena looked away, unsure if she believed it. I mean it, Emily said, placing a hand on Lena's shoulder. You didn't just perform. You told the truth. And we all felt it. From deeper in the corridor came the low rumble of voices, production assistants, donors, teachers, even some members of the board, all circling Mr. Hawthorne. A man in a tailored navy suit jabbed a finger toward the curtain. That girl just gave us the only honest moment of the night. Why wasn't she given more time? Who arranged this order? I did, Hawthorne snapped, clearly rattled. The program was carefully curated. Curated to exclude talent? Or just to avoid being upstaged? The words stung loud enough to carry back to Lena, who sat frozen, her hands curled around her knees. She didn't want to be a scandal. She didn't want to be anyone's moment. She just wanted to play. Then, from the edge of the wings, a boy stepped out onto the stage. 15, maybe 16, still in tuxedo pants too long for his legs, holding a mic that trembled in his grip. I know I'm not supposed to speak, he said nervously. But I have to. The crowd hushed. Security paused. No one interrupted. That girl. She made me feel something I didn't know music could do. I've been playing cello for 8 years. I've hit every note. But I've never felt that. Scattered applause turned into cheers. The chant began again. Let her play. Let her play. The curtain rippled. Backstage, Mr. Hawthorne looked like a man losing control of his own orchestra. You'll go back out there and bow, he hissed at Lena, cornering her again. But we are not turning this into a... It's not theatrics, Lena cut in, her voice low but razor sharp. It's music. And you heard it. Even if you're too afraid to admit it. She walked away before he could reply. At the edge of the curtain, her father stood waiting. Still in his mechanic's jacket. Still smelling faintly of oil and winter. He didn't say anything. He just clapped. Slow. Steady. Proud. Lena stood at the edge of the stage, heart hammering so loud it almost drowned out the chant. Let her play. Let her play. It didn't sound like rebellion anymore. It sounded like something ancient. Like justice. Her fingers twitched. Not from nerves this time, but from a kind of pull, like the music wasn't done with her yet. Then the curtain rose again. No one gave the cue. It just happened. Maybe a tech took pity. Maybe someone had enough. Lena stepped back onto the stage, her battered upright still center stage like it had been waiting for her. The crowd roared, not with polite applause, but with full-throated hunger. They weren't here for spectacle anymore. They were here for truth. She sat, palms hovering. The room went still. She thought of playing the same piece. But no. Something softer stirred in her memory. A lullaby. Unfinished. Hummed by her mother once, years ago, never written down. Just a wisp of sound on a rainy night. Tonight, Lena would finish it. She began with a single note, gentle, barely there. Then a second, twining around the first. A melody unfolded like a breath held too long finally being released. Sweet, aching, full of warmth. And then, like a miracle, the orchestra joined her. No sheet music. No plan. Just instinct. A cello came in low, tentative. Then a violin, following her rhythm. No one led. No one followed. They belonged. Together, they wove the lullaby into something holy. A mother's song reborn as a hymn of hope. The audience didn't make a sound. Not a cough. Not a rustle. They listened like the music might save them. And in a way, it did. When Lena struck the final chord, it wasn't grand. It was soft. Like a goodbye. Like a thank you. And the hall erupted again. This time the standing ovation was unanimous. Mr. Hawthorne had vanished backstage. Red-faced, pacing. His headset had been ripped off and thrown onto a table. Who gave her the stage, he barked. No one answered. Where is security? Where is the stage manager? They're clapping, someone muttered. He spun around. One of the donors, Mrs. Fields, whose name graced an entire wing of the building, approached him with cool precision. "That was the most honest performance I've seen in decades," she said. "You tried to cut it short." "She's not even in the program," Hawthorne snapped. "She should have been the headliner," Fields replied, her voice like polished glass. "And if this institution can't recognize genius unless it's wrapped in a tuxedo and money, then maybe I've been funding the wrong place." That was the moment Hawthorne realized he hadn't just lost control of the night. He had lost the room. Back in the hallway, Lena collapsed onto a folding chair. She was soaked in sweat, her fingers sore, her pulse still racing. But her eyes glowed. Emily found her again. "You don't understand what you did tonight," she whispered. Lena gave a faint laugh. "I didn't mean to do anything." "Exactly," Emily said. "And that's why it worked." Down the hall, a quiet voice called her name. She turned. It was a woman in a midnight blue dress, badge pinned to her chest. A board member. A donor. Maybe both. She offered a warm hand. "You changed something tonight." Lena took it. "I didn't know I could." The woman leaned in. "Most revolutions don't begin with declarations. They begin with someone daring to be honest in a room full of liars." Then she walked away, leaving Lena to sit in the glow of what she didn't yet understand. A spark had been lit. And it wasn't going out anytime soon. By morning, the video had gone viral. A blurry, audience-shot clip of Lena playing her mother's lullaby now floated across timelines and screens from coast to coast. The caption was simple: "Girl with broken piano brings concert hall to tears." In less than 12 hours, it had over 700,000 views. By dinner, 2.3 million. The story reached local news first. Then national. Then global. Major platforms scrambled to get her name right. Lena Morrow. 17. No agent. No record deal. No fancy school. Just a girl with a second-hand piano, a calloused heart, and a story she dared to sing without words. And the world listened. Back at the conservatory, everything had changed, and nothing had. The old hierarchy still stood. Mr. Hawthorne still ran rehearsals. Still wore his sharp suits. Still tapped his baton like a monarch deciding who lived or died. But the students? They were different. Whispers turned into defiance. Murmurs into motions. Then came the moment. A mandatory rehearsal, 2 days after the performance. Hawthorne stood at the front of the hall, posture like a spear, voice clipped. "We will not discuss the viral situation," he said firmly. "It is irrelevant to our curriculum. Music is structure. Control. Not rebellion." He lifted his baton. But no one moved. Emily Daniels stood up. Her violin in hand, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not playing for someone who thinks control is more important than meaning." Then she walked out. Silence. Until a cellist followed. Then a clarinetist. Then half the brass section. Within 2 minutes, only 6 students remained in the chairs. Hawthorne's hand trembled, the baton slipping lower. For the first time in 20 years, he had no one left to conduct. Outside the rehearsal hall, Lena stood watching it all. She hadn't returned to gloat. She hadn't even planned to be there. Emily had asked her to stop by. Now she saw students gathered in quiet circles, playing their own compositions, sharing headphones, discussing emotion, not just scales. One boy approached her timidly, cheeks flushed. I watched your video with my mom." She cried. Then I cried. Lena smiled, embarrassed and moved. "Thanks. She's never liked classical music," he said. "But after watching you play," she said, "maybe I just never heard it honestly before." That stuck with Lena. Maybe I just never heard it honestly before. Later that night, she found herself back at home, curled in the garage on her old bench. Her father sat across from her, polishing a wrench. The air smelled of oil and cold metal. "You've got people calling," he said, holding up a sheet of notes. "Chicago. Paris. One from Japan." Lena didn't answer. "You scared?" he asked. She nodded. "Good," he replied. "Means you're about to do something that matters." She looked at the piano. Still chipped. Still catching on F sharp. But it had never failed her. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play, not for a video, not for a stage, just for herself. And for her mother. Across the country, people kept watching. Sharing. Crying. They didn't know her backstory. They didn't know the hours in a freezing garage, or the way grief had made her fingers shake for years. All they knew was this: a girl with nothing but a scarred piano had reminded them of what music was meant to be. Truth. The next morning, Lena's world changed, again. An envelope slid under the front door just after sunrise. No return address. No official seal. Just her name, handwritten in looping ink, Lena Morrow. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, a letter from Caroline Whitmore. The Caroline Whitmore. Renowned composer. Maverick. Former student of Mr. Hawthorne, and one of the few who had dared walk away from him at the height of her potential. The note was brief. Saw the footage. You played like lightning in a bottle. I want to meet you. Come to New York. No audition. Just bring your truth. C.W. Lena stared at it for a long time, unsure if she was still dreaming. Her father found her in the kitchen an hour later, still in pajamas, the letter crumpled slightly from how tightly she'd been holding it. He read it. Then looked up. "So," he said slowly. "You ready to go find out how far this thing goes?" She nodded before her courage could fade. 3 weeks later, she was standing outside a nondescript brick building on the Upper West Side, backpack slung over one shoulder, her notebook tucked beneath her arm. The Whitmore School of Music wasn't like the conservatory. It was chaos. Controlled, creative chaos. Inside, students rehearsed barefoot. Pianos lined the hallways. Someone was strumming a sitar in the courtyard. No ranks. No uniforms. Just sound. Color. Heart. And then came Caroline. Sharp. Poised. Barefoot in a floor-length cardigan, her graying curls tied in a loose knot. "You're shorter than I thought," she said as she shook Lena's hand. "You're taller," Lena replied. Caroline laughed. "Good. We'll get along." They walked together to a small, unassuming studio, just a grand piano, a chair, and walls covered with pinned-up sheet music, some barely legible. "This is where we start," Caroline said, settling onto the bench. Lena didn't know what to expect. A test? A performance? Instructions? But Caroline simply said, "Play something that scares you." Lena blinked. What? Not something perfect. Something true. So Lena did. Hands shaky, she began to play the piece she had composed the night after her mother's funeral. It was jagged, uneven. Raw. She hadn't touched it in years. When she stopped, Caroline didn't clap. Didn't speak. She just nodded. "Good. Now play it again. But this time, don't ask permission." Days turned to weeks. Weeks blurred into months. Lena practiced every day, not to impress, but to explore. She played lullabies and jazz riffs, broken melodies and unfinished chords. She walked the streets at night and wrote lyrics in diners. She cried more than once. But she also laughed in ways she hadn't in years. One day, Emily called. Hawthorne resigned. Lena froze. He what? Walked away. The board was circling. Donors too. Said he needed time to reflect. There was no glee in Emily's voice. Just a kind of quiet closure. Later that week, a package arrived at Lena's New York apartment. Her upright piano. Shipped by Emily, who had arranged it behind the scenes. A note was taped to the lid. Some voices shouldn't be left behind. Keep playing. Ed. That night, Lena sat at her old bench, rested her fingers on the chipped keys, and played until the sun began to rise. Not for fame. Not for revenge. For the silence inside her that had finally begun to sing. Snow began to fall on the day the invitation came. A heavy envelope, edged in gold, waited on her apartment doorstep in Manhattan. The seal shimmered faintly in the gray morning light. She opened it with slow, hesitant fingers, as if something sacred lay inside. New York Philharmonic Winter Gala. Featured guest, Lena Morrow. Guest conductor, Caroline Whitmore. She froze. Lena hadn't asked for this. She hadn't submitted an application. She hadn't performed for a live audience since that night. Caroline simply smiled when Lena showed her the invitation. I told you, she said. Your story has outgrown you. I didn't want to be a symbol, Lena whispered. I just wanted to be heard. Then don't be a symbol, Caroline replied. Just go be honest. That's all you've ever needed. The night of the gala arrived like a thunderstorm wrapped in velvet. The concert hall glittered, crystal chandeliers, marble floors, rows of suited guests brushing shoulders with people whose last names owned newspapers. Waiters drifted by with trays of champagne. Backstage, Lena waited quietly beside her upright piano. Yes, her piano. They had offered a Steinway. Pressured her. Pleaded. She declined. If she was going to play, it had to be the piano that had carried her grief, her fire, her story. The one her father had saved with grease-stained hands and hope. The one that stuck on F-sharp. The one that never lied. Emily was there too, standing nearby with her violin. You ready? She asked, her voice soft. No, Lena admitted. But I'm going anyway. The curtain rose. The crowd went silent. Lena walked out, dressed in a simple navy gown. No sequins. No shine. Just strength. She sat. The lights hit her skin, warm and blinding. She didn't speak. She didn't bow. She just placed her fingers on the keys. And played. Not the lullaby. Not the piece from the viral video. Something new. It didn't have a title. It wasn't written for prestige. It was shaped by winter rooftops, silent walks, tea with her father, Caroline's quiet challenges, Emily's bravery, and the worn photo of her younger self in the garage. It was not perfect. It was hers. The melody began uncertain. Fragile. But then grew, like a child learning to run. And then the audience leaned in. No coughs. No murmurs. Only breath, shared and held. The final chord was soft. She let it fade into the air without flourish. She didn't bow. She just looked out and said. I once played a piano no one believed in. But it believed in me. And now I try to make music the way that piano made me feel. Whole, even when I was missing pieces. The silence afterward was total. Then, they rose. One by one. Like an orchestra of believers who had finally remembered why they fell in love with sound. Weeks later, Lena returned to the conservatory, quietly, without cameras. A student had invited her to visit the new atrium. She stepped into the lobby and stopped. There, in the center of the room, surrounded by candles and folded letters, sat her old upright. Not behind velvet rope. Not on a pedestal. But open. Waiting. One note read, "You reminded me why I started playing." Another, "Music should never feel like a cage." That afternoon, Lena gave a small workshop to a group of first-year students. She didn't talk about fame. She talked about truth. And silence. And letting yourself crack a little if it means something real will come through. When a shy boy asked, "How do you know if you're good enough?" Lena smiled and said, "It's not about being good. It's about being honest. Music doesn't care if you're perfect. It cares if you mean it." That evening, she walked to the community center 2 blocks from her apartment, where she now volunteered weekly. The piano there was missing 6 keys and sat on a stack of old books. The kids didn't care. They wrote songs about weird dreams and hot dogs and lost friends. And Lena? She listened. Then played alongside them. Not as a teacher. Not as a star. Just a girl with music in her chest and dirt beneath her fingernails. A few months later, her first album dropped. Splinters. Self-produced. Raw. Recorded in a friend's living room with her upright. It hit #1 on the classical charts within a week. Not because it was flawless. But because it made people feel. And that, friends, is the story of Lena Morrow, the girl who turned a cracked piano into a revolution. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't apologize for imperfection. She played anyway. And in doing so, she reminded the world of something we too often forget: real beauty lives where courage meets truth. If you've ever been told you weren't enough, or that your voice didn't matter, let this story remind you. You are not the mistake in the melody. You are the reason the music matters. Thank you for watching True Echo, where every story we share proves that the quietest voices can shake the loudest rooms. Don't forget to like, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe for more powerful, soul-shaking stories that deserve to be heard. We'll see you in the next one.